allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did bring, I think there's 15 copies of the tables with the different uses. If maybe we could share, at least make it around somehow.
Good evening. My name is Attorney Matt Chorosky. I am the solicitor for the Main Township Board of Supervisors. The purpose of tonight's public hearing is to receive public comments on the proposed 2018 Main Township zoning ordinance. This is a public hearing pursuant to Section 10608 of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code and is being conducted for that purpose for enactment of a zoning ordinance. By way of background, what I think we're going to do is we'll probably go about 2 hours tonight. If we have to schedule possibly public future meetings, we'll do so. But I would ask everybody, before they comment on anything or provide any commentary, please state your name, keep your comments, we'd like to keep them concise, to the point. Please avoid repetition if a prior speaker has commented on the same subject. There's a lot of material to go over here and a lot of material to provide commentary on. With that said, I have a couple of exhibits that I would offer into evidence as the Township's exhibits. Exhibit 1, Township 1, is my letter dated June 20, 2017, forwarding a proposed copy of the zoning ordinance to the Columbia County Planning Commission for review and comment. Township Exhibit 2 is my memorandum to the Press Enterprise Legal Advertising Department, providing them with a copy of the proposed zoning ordinance for them to keep on file and record. Township Exhibit 3 is a proof of publication for tonight's hearing. Evidencing tonight's hearing was advertised on January 9th and January 16, 2018 in the Press Enterprise. And Exhibit 4 is the County Planning Commission comments dated November 3, 2017. I will give a copy of these to the court reporter for inclusion into the record. Just for the record tonight as well, the 3 supervisors are here. Chairman Robert Fry, Supervisor Richard Schuman, and Supervisor Tom Schuman. To my left is Larry Fraze, the zoning officer, and to my right is Carson Helfrich. He was the author or drafter of the proposed ordinance. This evening he will probably be responding or providing a lot of answers back to any commentary that we may receive. With that said, we'll open up the hearing for comments on the proposed draft ordinance. As I had stated before, please identify yourself before speaking, because we do have a court reporter stenographically trying to transcribe everything which is stated this evening. Please don't talk over each other. It's impossible for the court reporter to get that down. We want to try to keep it orderly and proceed in that type of fashion. Thank you.
Yes, Bill Miller. You are prohibiting mobile homes at individual lots in the township, is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Where is it listed?
There's a section in there, section 606.1, I believe it is. And the way that many ordinances were written in the past is that mobile homes on individual lots were only allowed in certain districts. But in current case law, you have to treat a mobile home the same as a stick-built home as long as it meets all of the, all of the standards, the same standards in terms of setbacks and building height, etc. So there's no need to list it separately.
But it's not obvious the way you have listed it.
Well, I think
it's section 8, I believe.
No, actually it's in section 606.1, but I don't think it needs to be obvious because under zoning law, that's a given.
y'all redid the goals, and I know when you had the work sessions, there was some conversation about the goals, and they were rewritten, and they're wonderful. I would agree with all of them. I would just wonder if there needs to be some clear tie-in between the goals and the objectives and how they can be used for the supervisors or the zoning board to make decisions on special exceptions and conditional uses. I assume that they should be taken into consideration.
Well, they can be taken into consideration, but when a zoning application is submitted, the application has to be evaluated based on the specific standards in the ordinance, and goals and objectives are not standards. So even in the case of a special exception before the zoning hearing board, they need to take a look at the specific standards and base their decision on that. They do have the ability to attach reasonable conditions to that, but the goals and objectives are exactly what it says, goals and objectives, and they're not specific standards that can be enforced.
So you're saying that if something complies with these standards that are written on each of these, that is all that has to happen, and then the special exception or the conditional use has to be approved, based just on these?
No, that's not what I said. The standards in the ordinance, there's a number of different standards in the ordinance in addition to the basic setbacks and lot coverage. There's a whole range of performance standards in Article 7, and there's specific review standards for special exceptions in Article 12.
And are those standards in any way tied into the goals and objectives, or are the goals and objectives just there to look pretty?
Well, I think a lot of the standards are tied into the goals and objectives in terms of preserving open space and controlling commercial and industrial development, et cetera. But again, you can't really confuse the goals and objectives with specific standards for enforcement.
But I don't think you can disregard them either.
And my opinion is that they aren't disregarded.
So I think that there are times when if somebody's asking for a special exception for, I don't know, pick something, for conversion apartments in an ag district. It may meet all of these, and it may comply with the ordinance that you're speaking of. It could not comply or support the goals and objectives.
Is that a question, or I guess that's a statement?
I guess I'm asking for feedback, because if that's the case, then I think the goals and objectives need not be listed, because, and there's no mechanism, if that's the case, there's no mechanism for the supervisors or the zoning board to do anything but to approve it based on these and the specific ordinances that you're referring to.
And they can, as I mentioned earlier, they can attach conditions of approval, for example, maybe increased setbacks or landscaping buffers, those types of things based on.
But they can't not approve a special exception or a conditional use.
If it meets the standards, that's correct.
Then I would suggest that these goals and objectives are worthless.
Bill Whitler, paragraph 806.2B. You have a minimum lot size for commercial animal husbandry 10 acres. What about a rabbit operation? You can raise rabbits in much smaller acreage than 10 acres.
I think that was one of the sections that, just for the record too, is we did receive, I think it was 17 pages.
Yeah, that's me.
What's that?
That's from me.
No, I understand that. We did receive 17 pages from Mr. Bittler. I did go over all of those items one by one. And I think that was one of the items that I made a note that we need to discuss that with the board. So we'll take note of that, and that's on my list.
Gerald Bozeman. Under your definition of shed, you have too small for the storage of an automobile. Is that a Chevy Suburban or a mini car such as you get from Kia, Hyundai, or Chevy? It's a very nondescript definition.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at that.
What do you mean by automobile? You wrote it, what do you mean by it?
I mean, there's a common definition of automobile.
Well, I'm telling you, there's a size of it's a
Well, and I just,
2.5 times ratio.
right, and what I'm suggesting is that that's a good point, and we'll take a look at it.
I think the previous ordinance had a size limitation, 100 square feet, 125 square feet. And if it's going to be enforceable, there has to be some specifics, not nondescript as it is right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim Adams. Going back to Cindy's comment, I think my concern is the goals and objectives seem to read like there's a concern to keep Maine Township as a rural farm community. But if you have an ag district and the special exceptions allow for things like apartments and kennels and lumber yards and sawmills and veterinary clinics, it's no longer an ag, it's no longer a farm community. There's businesses being run, there's the whole complexion changes when you start having that many industries in one area. And so if those are allowed special exceptions, then you're going to stop having a rural community.
Okay, could I have your name?
Jim Adams.
Bill Miller again. Paragraph 807.2H, this has to do with private stables as well as commercial stables. You say the township must approve the soil erosion and sedimentation plan or the management plan. There's no requirement for approvals of this plan.
And I did read, I looked at that and I made a suggested change that, that the applicant would have to get them approved by the Conservation District.
They're not approved. They review them, or they can come to the front and review them, they don't approve them. There's no requirement to approve them.
Okay, so we'll change it to review. What was section again?
Let me see, 807.2H.
Charles Williams. At one of the earlier meetings, I had questioned having some sort of relief in the conservation open space districts. Currently, it requires 5 acres for subdivisions, and stated by doing 5 acre subdivisions, it would knock me out of the Clean and Green program. I also didn't want to maintain a 5 acre parcel in retirement. And I was asking if there was some type of relief for a smaller subdivision within Conservation Open Space District. How was that addressed in any of the documents? I went through and
I don't recall discussing that specifically.
Weren't we putting the houses in a cluster?
Yeah, we were, one of the things we talked about proposing is conservation design, you know, where we allow smaller lots with with a balanced open space, but I think we can take a look at that in terms of the clean and green. I did not think that, so we'll look at that. But I understand what you're saying, because if you do a 5 acre subdivision, that exceeds, what is it, 1 acre or 2 acres?
2 acres a year.
2 acres, yeah, that exceeds 2 acres, but I thought,
But
but Matt,
you have to be in the 10
correct me
acres
if
to be
I'm
in
wrong,
green.
if
Right,
the
but-
township
but if you-
ordinance, I think if the township ordinance requires a larger minimum lot size, I think that's okay with the clean and green program.
I don't know the answer to that.
Wait,
I know
Well, you
the
need
state
10
statute
acres
says-
for clean and green. If you take it from less than 5 now and put it down to 2, you're
No,
not
this
eligible.
is a different issue. It's if
Right.
you're subdividing a piece off of a clean and green parcel, you're only allowed under the state law to do 2 acres per year. If you do more than, excuse me, 2 acres per year, then you get into a rollback situation.
And if I'm required to do a 5-acre subdivision off of a 38-acre parcel, it's more than 10% of it, and that knocks the whole parcel out of clean and green.
I think we need to follow up on that to see what different counties do it a little bit differently, I think, but we'll.
I'm looking to try to get some relief that I don't have to go through this special exception and
Right.
pay, $1,500 to
Yeah.
jump through all the hoops.
Okay.
Bill Biller again. Are there any conservation design subdivisions in the county?
Are there any in the county? I don't know the answer to
What
that.
about northeast Pennsylvania?
Yeah, there's a number in northeast Pennsylvania, in Monroe County, and I know of at least one in our township, at Lake Wallenpaupack.
Gerald Bozeman, section 701.6 on noise. This appears to be part of an investigator's how-to manual rather than a zoning ordinance. If we need all these details of making noise measurements, why is there not similar detail given for lighting, odors, water quality, dust, etc.? It appears there's at least 3 pages in here that don't belong here at all.
You mean the noise?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They're an operator's manual, not in the zoning ordinance.
Well, what do you suggest is in the zoning ordinance?
We can give limitations.
Well, there are limitations.
I know people go through all these details on how to measure it.
That's
And there's
correct.
probably not one, there's probably 5 people in the township that know how to run the log equation that you have in here. So it's worthless. It's taking up space. We're spending money for something that's of no value to the township.
Let me explain, do you want me to explain a little bit how that section works? I mean, that section is not intended to apply to nuisance situations like barking dogs or loud music, because that's not a zoning issue. Okay, these noise standards apply if, let's say, a new industry is coming into the township. That industry has to document compliance with these standards. And what they need to do is measure the ambient noise level, and then they're allowed a certain increase up to a maximum.
But it doesn't say that under 701.6. That may be the intent, that's not what it says.
Okay.
As it reads right now, it could be a barking dog, it could be any noise. It could be music from a party.
No, but you don't understand how zoning works, because these are applied to new uses
It doesn't say that though.
and non-residential uses. Well, it doesn't say that, but that's the basic tenet of zoning.
That may be, but the zoning ordinance ought to be readable and understandable by the common person, not someone who has specialized training. That should be applicable throughout the document.
Bill Biller again. Paragraph 504.1C1. That has to do with a commercial building that has attached a residential unit.
Right.
We say it has to be occupied, the residential unit has to be occupied by an owner or a worker. Why? Because if I have a storefront and I have a rental apartment above it, I'm not going to rent to myself, I'm not going to live there myself, I'm not going to rent to one of my workers there.
Well, the intent there is to allow residential, and I think that, you see what district that applies to there? But the intent is if that's allowed, if it's in a district where residences aren't allowed, we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, well,
But
Main Street's almost any town has exactly what I described to you.
right, well, yeah, I know this section.
I'd like to go back and address your comment, if I could, Mr. Belderman, on section 701. Article 7 sets performance standards and environmental protection. In 701A, it says, "The following performance standards shall apply to all proposed new or expanded non-residential uses and residential uses explicitly referenced by a specific section." So it sets forth in there where those criteria that you had referenced would apply to. It gives guidance there.
It gives guidance, but why do we need all the detail that are really part of a how-to manual when there is no similar information given for water quality, dust, anything else? If we're going to give the details for one, it ought to be consistent.
I'm answering your question with respect to what it applies to and what it doesn't apply to. I can't answer the rest of those questions.
So you only answered part of my question, is what you've done.
You raised an issue as to what it would apply to. I've addressed that question. I can't answer the rest.
Now, we keep being told, well, we're going to address it, we're going to address it. How do we as the public have an opportunity to review what's being addressed? And by whom is it being addressed?
Basically, what I think we will probably do is, once we have all of these comments, the Board of Supervisors will review those, and I will make changes based on those comments, and there'll be a document that shows those changes.
If the supervisors desire to accept those
If
comments.
whatever changes the supervisors are proposing, and I would show any additions by double underline and eliminations by strike through, and I assume that will be on the website.
Kim Horsley. My question is, what township, normally you take another township and that's your basis where you start from. What township was that?
This is kind of an amalgam of ordinances that I've done in rural municipalities over the last probably 15 years. In Columbia County, Beaver Township, Orange Township, Briar Creek, yeah, that's Columbia, right? Yeah, they all run together. Briar Creek Township, a number in Wyoming County, most of them are rural municipalities. But like I say, what happens is, I have a basic ordinance that I start with, but when something new comes out, let's say, for example, one of the newest, relatively newest things was cell towers and rights-of-way. Well, then I'll do a new section of that and blend that into the ordinance. So the way we put this ordinance together was I did a first draft, and based on my current model for rural municipalities, and then the supervisors and the attorney and I and the zoning officer actually literally sat down and went through it page by page. So that's how we got to the point where we were. Now, one of the things that the ordinance is quite long. We added a lot of definitions, and the current ordinance that's now in effect, did not specifically address a lot of uses, more current uses. So that's, we added a lot of that in. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you have a specific community that you've worked on one that was very, very similar?
Beaver Township, Beaver Township, Orange Township, although that's been quite a few years. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tunkhannock area. There's Eaton Township and Monroe Township. They kind of lie south of Tunkhannock down towards Dallas. They've adopted something similar to this, and it's been working quite well. Nescopec Township.
You said Monroe, what was the other one?
Eaton, E-A-T-O-N.
Thank you.
Yeah, and another one in Wyoming was Exeter Township.
So, I'll go again. 6013D, that has to do with the clean and green, where you can take off one lot per year. Do you have that correct? Because you say that it doesn't apply, that lot doesn't apply, the 601 doesn't apply to that lot. However, a lot shall be counted towards your 2 per 5 years. So that does not count towards the 2 to 5 years.
No, it means that it does count. I think it's correct, because it, is considered a subdivision.
So you can only do 2 of those in a 5-year period.
I think that's the way it's written now, yes.
Okay, going,
Give me that section number again.
601.3B. You would not be able to develop anything else off that parcel then. You get your 2 lots in 5 years,
No, that's not what that
what
says.
else is saying?
You could do the whole parcel as a conservation design subdivision.
I'm talking, you're not going that route. You're going the standard development route.
Okay, well, that's not what you said, but yes, that's correct. If you're just gonna subdivide a lot off without doing conservation design, that section would apply, yes.
Okay, another question concerning the selling of development rights. Is the township going to adopt that?
It's in there as proposed, and that's, that's an optional. That's not a mandatory, that's
That I understand, but
Right.
what's the opinion of the township supervisors?
That's a section for the transferable development rights where somebody, just as a quick aside here, transferable development rights allows, let's say, a farmer that has 100 acres, and if he would be allowed to subdivide that at 2 acres per lot, he would conceivably get 50 lots off of that parcel. Under transferable development rights, what the farmer could do is sell his development rights to somebody else, and they could have increased density on their parcel, assuming they have adequate water and sewer. And the intent of that is to allow larger landowners to get the value out of their property without having to develop. And we did talk about that section, and it's under consideration.
So you also say it must be transferred to residential or rural residential districts.
Correct.
Why?
Because that's where you want the higher density. That does go back to the goals and objectives of trying to keep more open space throughout the rest of the township.
Gerald Bozeman, under your definitions, for bed and breakfast, you refer to country inn. Under country inn, it says breakfast may be served. How can you have a bed and breakfast if you don't serve breakfast? Under the county rule, breakfast is served. So why are we deviating here?
The county rule, does the county have zoning?
The county treasurer office has rules in terms of taxation.
Okay, well, that's,
It's still a county rule that's applicable to bed and breakfast in Maine Township.
okay,
We are part of Columbia County.
right, there's no direct relationship between the county taxation and what's in the zoning ordinance.
But how can you have a bed and breakfast if you don't serve breakfast?
I don't have an answer.
They're contradictory terms. If it's a bed and breakfast must be served to be a bed and breakfast. Otherwise, it's an inn, under different rules in the state.
So, I guess what we could do is just add another definition in for bed and breakfast. That would be a possibility.
That serves breakfast.
Right.
Or can we change it to say include breakfast?
Yeah, we can,
Instead of changing, adding something to it, can we just?
well, we could just put in a new definition and add another use, so that would clarify it.
All right.
Gerald Bozeman again. Is there a reason we reference Carbon County soil data?
No, that was, where is that?
I don't have it here, but it's referenced, it's in the document, it's referenced as Carbon County data.
That was probably from a Carbon County municipality. I'll do a search for Carbon County.
So much of this is actually just cut and paste, is what you're telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. I never denied that, because I start with a particular model and take updated sections from a more recent municipality. It'd be crazy just to start from scratch every time.
Does your computer have spell check on it? Do you use it?
I try to.
Well, the number of misspelled words in here suggests it wasn't used effectively.
Bill, that way again. 824.2, country inns. Why do you limit the number of rentable rooms? I would think that'd be an economic consideration, not a township consideration.
Well, I think, you know, and I don't remember the specific discussion here, but
I said
typically,
8.
what's that?
You limit it to 8
8.
rooms.
I think that the part of the reason is so that, you know, it doesn't, you know, turn into a big resort or a hotel.
You know, what if I have 12 rooms?
Well, then
And
it's
I have
not,
the 4 extras are where I'll make a profit.
I mean, typically, you limit the number of rooms in a bed and breakfast or a country inn. I mean, if you want to allow motels or hotels in that district, well, then list it as a hotel.
I've been in the rental business 45 years, so I asked the question.
Right, and that's, you know, I tried to answer it. I mean, the other option would be not to limit the number of rooms and allow motels and hotels in that
I don't think
district.
we're gonna, in Maine Township, you're never gonna get there.
Is that 5 rentable bedrooms? Or is it
Rentable-
5 rooms?
It says, I don't think it says, 6.
Not more than
8
5 rentable rooms.
8 rentable rooms is what it says.
On which one do you look at?
824.2.
824.2 says not more than 5 rentable rooms shall be provided in an establishment.
5, I thought it was 8. My copy.
It says 5.
5, that's a small amount of rentable
And
rooms.
is that bedrooms?
Yeah,
Or you're not counting the kitchen and the living room?
now, 5 rentable,
Okay.
why don't I add guest rooms in there? That would clarify it.
Well, I still think you have a problem. It should be the economics of the individual owns it rather than township.
Okay,
You know, I believe we tried to keep this to match the building code.
Pardon?
I think we tried to keep this to match the building codes too.
Okay, what the building codes do for you, you go higher than that.
Well, most bed and breakfasts, I do 14 townships, 3 boroughs, and there's never been a new bed and breakfast built anywhere. They usually go into existing structures.
Yeah, they'll renovate, I suspect.
Right. So, the state has allowed us, not a loophole, but they have allowed space in there for when you go to these existing structures that you don't have to meet the full code for like a hotel. So, it depends on how you're classifying this thing. You can get a bed and breakfast actually into a hotel status. And that's a lot of extra expense that you don't need. So I think we were trying to keep it, you know, so we could keep it as defined as a bed and breakfast.
Well, I don't have a problem defining it as a bed and breakfast. I have a problem with the upper limits that you place on the rentable rooms.
Where would you like to see the upper limits?
I think it's up to the owner, because it's economics. If he's not gonna make money on it, he's not gonna invest in your township.
Gerald Bodeman again. Commercial vehicle. A truck with a gross or combined vehicle weight of 26,001 pounds or more. So that makes all of my farm vehicles commercial vehicles.
what section are you in?
Definition. Commercial vehicle. Page, section 312.
But that's a definition, correct, but, you know, that's, I believe that's referenced in that Article 7 that exempts agriculture.
In some aspects, it doesn't exempt agriculture across the board. It's not really nilly exemption or across the board
Well,
exemption.
what section does that, in which section does that commercial definition limit agriculture?
You talk about commercial vehicles entering certain places, like on sawmills. So I can't use my truck to haul lumber into a sawmill?
Where does it say that?
By definition, if you're talking about...
No, where does it say that commercial vehicles
It
cannot?
limits the number, it limits the number. And that's what the supervisors have done on from a request for a special exception for a sawmill here. They limit it to 1 truck a day.
Okay, but my question is, where in the ordinance does it limit access by commercial vehicles? I know it does for home occupations, but I don't recall any other section that limits commercial vehicle access.
Why should it limit it anywhere?
Well, it doesn't, that's what I'm saying.
You said that's for home businesses, you just said that.
Right, because a home occupation is intended to be accessory to a residence, and so you want to limit the amount of commercial activity. That's the intent of a home occupation.
So that if I have a home occupation, I cannot have, you're basically saying I can't have a commercial carrier, yellow freight, come into that property.
Tractor trailer,
Yes.
that's correct. In a
So
resident-
it's a piece of equipment that is shipped by commercial carrier, how do we get it there?
In residential,
This is overly restrictive in some respects, is what I'm saying.
okay, let's think about this scenario. Let's say you live in a planned residential community, and your neighbor has a home occupation, and and they get 4 deliveries a day by tractor trailer. Don't you think that would have some negative effect on the neighbors?
Not necessarily.
Okay, that's your opinion. My opinion is that that in a residential district, the intent of a home occupation is that it's accessory to the residence and not a full-scale business. They can certainly get deliveries by UPS, straight trucks, straight body trucks or whatever, but I think it's not an unreasonable provision.
Well, 26,000 pounds, there are a lot of straight trucks that are over 26,000 pounds.
We can look at the number, we can look at the weight.
And basically what you're saying is you can't even come in there with a Allied van line trailer to move somebody. It's a commercial vehicle.
So what do you feel ought to say, Jerry?
If you're going to limit tractor trailers for delivery, put the number in and put the size in. Don't make it a commercial vehicle, period.
So you're saying tractor trailers, not straight?
Well, they say 26,001 pounds.
Okay, but that's what the state classifies as a commercial vehicle also.
Well, that may be.
All right, so if he follows that rule. it's a
Just because he
commercial
says we should, does that mean we have to?
I didn't say that.
That's
What
why
I
we're
said
here
to
tonight.
you, quote was, what do you think we ought to put it at? Stop the tractor trailers?
No, absolutely not, because otherwise you can't get a moving van in.
You think there should be a maximum number per day?
Well, maybe that would be a start.
Okay, well,
And what do you think the maximum ought to be per day?
Perhaps 2.
Okay, so just one more than what we suggested.
I don't know what the number ought to be, Tom, I really don't.
I mean, we're here to feel out what the people want too, you know?
Understand?
So,
It would
He's
depend
handling it?
upon the business.
pardon?
It would depend upon the business.
Well, I'm sure if you lived in Wonderview, you wouldn't want 4 tractor trailers coming in and out every day, delivering something to a home business, somebody does, craft sales or, who knows? They might be a blacksmith in their garage for all I know. You wouldn't want 3 or 4 tractor trailers coming out of there.
Why not?
Right. Why not?
What number do you think? As many as they want?
Sure. Why not?
I'd like to hear from somebody who lives in a development to see what their opinion is. Most of us live kind of out in the rural
Yeah, we
area.
live on a road, if 10 tractor trailers come up this road, it wouldn't bother me. But I would think in Wonderview or in the trailer courts, it might bother somebody there.
Well, you're being unrealistic, Tom. There's no way you're going to get 10 tractor trailers to one house in Wonderview at any rate.
That's what we're asking,
But I don't know what the magic number ought to be. But to say commercial vehicle and 26,000 pounds puts limitations on that are inappropriate.
I understand what you're saying. I think maybe it would be better to define it as a tractor trailer.
What about my straight truck that's 56,000 pound gross weight?
I just said it would be better to define it as a tractor trailer.
So my straight truck, my 10-wheeler is okay, 56,000 pounds.
I guess if we define it as a tractor trailer,
It's a straight job. It's a straight truck.
And not all tractor trailers are 80,000. It can be single axle tractor, single axle trailer, which is not 80,000 pounds. My point is there has to be some thought given to this to make it practical. And right now, it doesn't seem that much thought to be given to it.
okay, well, we'll look at it. That's all I can say at this point.
Bill Hitler again. Why did you change the side setbacks from 15 to, well, on accessory buildings, the old ordinance has accessory buildings 15 feet, primary 20. You now have 20 for everything.
I don't remember that discussion. I guess the board just felt that.
Okay, here's the problem. There's no problem on a 2-acre lot. But a lot of the residents of Maine Township live in Winterview. They have very small lots down there. I can see now, under the old ordinance, a resident getting a permit to put a garage up in the side yard. He has 15 feet to go. Under the new ordinance, his neighbor gets a permit to put a garage up in the side yard, and he's over 3 feet into this no man's land.
You need to take a look at section 911.1. It talks about non-conforming lots of record. It says that the setbacks may be reduced by the same ratio as the lot is non-conforming as to area, but no side setback shall be reduced to less than 5 feet, and no rear setback shall be reduced to less than 10 feet. So
But why did you change it to begin with? That's my question.
because that's what the board felt was appropriate. So this provides a little bit more relief even than the old ordinance, because if it's a non-conforming lot, you can go down to 5 feet on the sides and 10 feet on
It
the...
only becomes non-conforming under this new rule.
What do you mean it's on, no, I mean, if the lot was non-conforming before and we didn't
It may
change
not have
it...
been.
What's that?
It may not have
Yeah,
been.
but the lot sizes are the same. You know, they're...
I have no problem with the lot size. I have a problem with an individual wanting to put a garage up in the side yard.
I understand that.
But I don't understand why you changed from the current ordinance from 15 feet to the new ordinance 20 feet.
Does anybody remember that specific discussion?
I don't remember the specifics.
No, I think part of it was that on the existing, on lots that do comply, you thought there was room to meet those setbacks, but on the
Well, if it
non...
was a non-conforming lot, we gave them the benefit of the doubt,
Right, that
because we made it smaller for them.
we made it less of a setback to
Yeah.
avoid the variance issues.
Larry, do you remember anything about that?
Right. So I think again, the whole idea was that if somebody has a conforming lot, they can meet the 20 feet, but if not, this section applies and they can go down to 5 feet and down to 10 feet.
Okay, so you're not going to charge them for a zoning variance, right?
No, there's no requirement for a hearing. This is by right.
Okay.
Right. This is by right. So they don't need the variance in that
All right.
case.
Jerome Bodeman again. You have the definition of retaining wall here, in excess of 4 feet. If I build a wall 3 feet 9 inches high, what is it?
It's not regulated.
I didn't find anything in here regulating a wall 4 feet high.
I think it's under fences and walls, as I recall.
What section is that, please?
505.2. Hedges, walls, and fences. Other questions?
Bill Miller again. Why do you have a different maximum lot depth to this ratio for conservation design to just normal design? 4:1 to normal, 5:1 in conservation design.
Because of the conservation design lots are much smaller, and you know, you may need to have a little bit greater.
Why do you need that ratio anyway?
Just so you don't have bowling alley lots. And again, this is for new lots. You know, so somebody doesn't lay out a lot that's 100 feet wide and 700 feet long. That's the whole idea of the lot ratio.
Okay, we need to take a break for that.
I got a picture of the material choice. Yeah. So I got a picture there too. Do you remember why? If you were charged with reproduce.
No, I was a kid.
Was Adler charged? No. He was. You said that in the
I get to see you over here. In the corner. Just wanted to make sure Matt got a copy of my letter, so.
You know, one of the guys that answered that. Well, we got a picture. But I don't know how much. I can't remember what I had for
Not to worry about the computer and these points.
Yeah. She fired a computer, downloading stuff. Yeah.
Too bad. Quite a while, right?
We'll be back.
Yeah, Mom told me.
Who's next? Is there anybody else that hasn't?
If I may. Go ahead. Sir. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Sean Logston. I'm an attorney from Drums, Pennsylvania. I represent, as many of you know, James and Kimberly Orzelak, who own property over on Old Salt Lake in Bloomsburg, well, Main Township. And Josiah and Amanda Orzelak, who own property also over on Salt Lake. As you also might be aware, my clients are currently involved in litigation, which involves one of the township supervisors, Mr. Schuman, and his wife regarding the use of their property in Main Township. My clients have also intervened in the uniform construction called the UCC appeal that also involves the bed and breakfast that's being operated on the Schuman property. With that being said, I sent a letter to the solicitor for the township, and I'm assuming copies will be distributed to the rest of the supervisors, but just wanted to come tonight and kind of explain some of the high points of my client's position in regards to some of the suggested zoning amendments and specifically a few zoning amendments as they relate to the agricultural district. Basically, this attempt to modify the zoning here, or the zoning ordinance to allow country inns in the agricultural zone, I don't see it serving, or my client's position and my position is that it serves no legitimate zoning purpose other than furthering what would be the private interests of the Schumans. This use, there was no bed and breakfast use under the previous zoning ordinance, and this cottage inn was only permitted, I believe, in the downtown village district as a special exception. The term country inn as it's being used in this zoning ordinance is pretty clearly a bed and breakfast in disguise. Now, this type of use, in my opinion, should not be permitted by right in any zoning district where single-family residential is the permitted use, or is a principal permitted use. This type of use is simply not compatible with single-family residential use. I mean, in an age where we have Airbnbs coming in to the Poconos in different areas, and especially rural areas, it seems like we want to control this more, not give it a permitted use in an agricultural district or in a district where a single family is the primary use. At the very least, our position would be that this would require not a permitted use. This would be should require zoning review and approval to ensure the compatibility and the conformity with the chosen zone. In addition, the requirements for the country inn that are listed under section 800 and 824 are pretty much as bare minimum as you can be. I don't believe they offer any real protection for any of the neighboring properties. And of course, as the gentleman earlier discussed, the noise, the provisions relating to noise investigations and testing would essentially shield the property, especially as it relates to my clients, the property in question, from any kind of realistic enforcement possibilities. I also represent, obviously, James and Kim Warzlak, that also object to the change of the zoning of their property from rural residential to agricultural. As the Board of Supervisors should know, the nature of my client's property in the immediate neighborhood is residential, it's not agricultural. So again, this zoning change seems arbitrary and doesn't serve any legitimate purpose for the township. The continued efforts and operation of the commercial enterprises in the residential zone seem to be the only thing that this would benefit. Because in fact, Mr. and Mrs. Schuman's 2 acres of property, which neighbor my client's property, that wasn't rezoned to rural residential, still agricultural. In addition, when we're talking about a review, or when we're reviewing this proposed zoning ordinance, it seems that, in a sense, a lot of the issues that we're facing in the litigation, I'm not here to discuss litigation or litigate this case in any way. I'm just simply pointing out that we have a definition in this ordinance of non-conforming use as a legally existing use which predates the zoning ordinance and which does not comply with this ordinance. The nonconformity runs with the land and can continue and can be sold. Now, when the special exception was received to operate by Mr. and Mrs. Schuman to operate the wedding venue and the bed and breakfast, the zoning hearing board specifically stated that the business ends when this property is sold. Now, this new ordinance, or this new definition, would basically give, or let's just say any applicable property owner, the ability to convey their operation and keep it going in perpetuity as long as they can prove that it was quote-unquote grandfathered in. Even more concerning, in my opinion, is the fact that the ordinance expands the definition of landowner to include holders of options or contracts to purchase and lessees. And again, whether it's the property owners that are involved in our current litigation or whether it's any property owner, if someone has a lease agreement for a bed and breakfast, they now are standing as a landowner. It just seems that, especially where we have Township Supervisor who's also a landowner, who's also helping create the zoning ordinances, we're running into a lot of coincidences here that are raising the antennas of my clients and myself. And besides the provisions that seem to be, or at least arguably would somehow benefit the Schumans or anyone that's running this type of business in this zone, we have certain issues that I saw regarding the definition of agritourism, or agritourism, however you want to pronounce it. It's unusually broadly defined, where it provides basically opportunities for, well, let's just say farmers, to expand their operations into uses that are not going to be permitted to others. The new cottage industry, that's a permitted use, was never permitted in the agricultural district before. And this new retail sales of related products, again, not permitted in the agricultural district without a special exception. Obviously, you can see how my clients would be incredulous as to why this proposed ordinance seems to tilt this way, especially when we're talking about this agricultural zone in particular. Basically, I've just cited a handful of examples in my letter that I sent over to Attorney Tarowski, just detailing my client's concerns regarding this proposed zoning ordinance. Obviously, how the litigation proceeds and how my clients choose to proceed if this ordinance is passed as written would be another matter. But my purpose here tonight was to kind of bring to the public and the townships and the township supervisors, raise our concerns regarding just too many coincidences regarding especially the agricultural district and the way this is benefiting in a way that maybe it shouldn't be. Thank you.
Anything else?
Gerald Bozeman, a footnote to all the district schedule of uses tables states that a principal residential structure shall not be less than 100 feet from cropland, pasture land, or a barnyard or building housing livestock, not on the development parcel. That needs to be modified to also include wells, because as a farmer, I cannot spread manure within 100 feet of a well.
Jerry, we already have that ordinance in effect.
So incorporate it here so it's all in one place, rather than having to look at 3 or 4 different places.
We
for
can
the
do
same
that, but I
information.
mean, that ordinance is already in effect.
Because that was a ruling by the zoning hearing board in an instance in this township that was totally ignored in the Zeisloff subdivision.
That ordinance was put in after
It
that.
was put in after that,
It was, what was put in after
that
that?
ordinance.
I know, but the development basically ignored a zoning hearing board ruling that should have been followed and it wasn't. So I'm concerned that we do not say well in here, so that if somebody picks up the zoning ordinance, the details should be here, not in 3 or 4 different places. And all you have to do is add the word well.
I took that note.
He put it in.
Larry, you issue a well permit anyways, right?
That's another addition we made with well permits, we never had them before. And that's to follow up on this stuff.
Cindy Hoffman. I would just kind of like to question why, and I don't remember the conversation regarding this, but why we would allow conversion apartments in the ag district. And basically, going back to the previous conversation I had with you, there's no way to stop it if they meet all the ordinances and all this stuff. And also campgrounds or recreational vehicle parks. I would question whether they should be allowed in the ag district also.
Bill Miller again. It's my understanding in reading this ordinance that any parcel over 10 acres in the ag or conservation open space must be developed under the conservation design criteria.
Correct.
And the only exception is the 2 lots for every 5 years. That's right.
I believe that's the way that it's written, yes.
That's what the supervisor is going to buy.
I thought we were giving them the option to use that conservation.
We discussed that back and forth, but
Yeah,
we decided
we were
that...
gonna give them 2 or 3 different options for that.
Well, there's two or three different options within the conservation design, but we discussed the fact that it would be mandatory in those districts. I mean, if you're having, if that's not the way that you want it, we can certainly change that and make it optional. But that's, I think the way I had it written first, it was optional, and then we discussed it, and you thought that was probably the best way to conserve, to conserve farmland and open space to conserve farmland and open space, but we can certainly discuss that again if you think that would be better as an option.
Yeah, because who would maintain that property after?
Well, there's a couple of ways that it could go, is if, let's say if somebody had 200 acres, and, they were gonna do a subdivision, well, the way that the conservation design works is that let's say under 200 acres, they could get 100 units,
Yes.
at 1 unit per 2 acres. So, they can either chop up that whole 200 acres and lay out roads through the whole thing and, carve it into 200 100 2-acre lots. I really do know my math. But the other option would be, under conservation design, you would allow them, let's say, to reduce those lots to 3/4 of an acre. They'd still only get the 50 units. Is my math off again now?
And then they would have to supply water and sewage?
They'd have to conceivably supply water and sewer, and then the balance of that, a certain amount of that open space would be dedicated to those landowners to use, which would be a homeowners association. But let's say it was a farmer. Well, the farmer could actually retain ownership of the balance of that open space with the conservation easement, similar to the county ag easements that are perpetual, so it couldn't be further developed or used for open space. But the farmer then could, retain ownership of that and continue to farm it because it would be preserved forever. So you're really kind of shifting the density, you're shifting the number of units to a smaller area of the property, and then the open space is conserved, and a homeowners association could own it, or it could be transferred to maybe to the game commission, or, some other entity that's gonna.
Well, I know homeowner associations didn't seem to work in Weatherfield.
Well,
That was the problem.
that's maybe
But
because
what I
what-
want to ask you is, if they put it in that development where they 3/4 acres,
Right,
they supply the sewage, and I don't know if we talked about water or not.
well, right.
Okay, can they sell what's left, the rights to the state to not build houses? They can't build houses there anyway.
No, they couldn't sell it because the state wouldn't buy it because it's already conserved and locked up for no further development. In other words, the density is all taken up on that smaller part of the parcel. And the balance could be open space, and again, the farmer or landowner could retain.
They can still farm it.
Right.
Or they could sell, like you say, to the game commission, or lease it to the game commission.
Well, conceivably, but yes, right. So
Because I would think it'd be hunting too close to the houses. and that's-
Well, right, whatever, but in other words, they can't, once that density is moved to the smaller part of the parcel, the balance is preserved forever as open space, one way or the other, right?
Is there anything we can put in the ordinance to mandate them to maintain that? Or are they gonna let it just grow up in weeds and brush?
Well, I mean, if it's just open space and it's just forest or whatever, what's the difference as long as it's not being developed? But I mean, let's say if they have a playground or some walking areas next to the units, yes, under the county subdivision and land development ordinance requires ownership and maintenance of that. Right.
Bill Billigan, what's the ownership of this land? Normally, a developer will buy land and develop it. You're talking about the farming. Then farming this land in conservation.
Well, the farmer could develop it.
How many are you going to do?
Well, you laugh, but there's arrangements that, the farmer could work with the developer. He could be the landowner, and a developer can develop without having, fee simple title to the land. He could just have the right to develop.
I hear you.
Right.
Gerald Bodeman, what is the correct citation for the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code?
The correct citation, that's Act 247 of 1968 as amended.
How do you reference it in a document such as this? Because right now it's referenced in 5 different forms.
Well, you were able to tell that it was the planning code when you read it, right?
Not 100%. That's the inference, but it doesn't say that. It should be consistent. And the same with the County Planning Commission, or the Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance. Some places you use county, you spell it out, and then all of a sudden you throw in the acronym SALVO and expect people to know what it is. It's never defined.
But is salvo in the definitions?
No.
Could we put salvo in the definitions? so
Yeah,
that we
I'll
know-
clear that up. You know, I can clear that up, it's not a big deal.
But a rule of writing is you are consistent, and this document fails miserably in terms of consistency.
Bill Miller again. In my 17-page write-up, I had many comments about the setbacks and property lines of your storage, animal buildings, et cetera.
And that's one of the things I marked for discussion.
It's not going to be 50 feet. I'm not going to have my neighbors manure pile 50 feet from my line.
Going back to the previous conversation about open space.
Can you just state
Oh,
your
sorry,
name?
Jim Adams. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the current code is if you buy a 100-acre lot, you subdivide 52-acre lots. That's the minimum.
Correct.
Under the new code, you could put in 50 3/4-acre lots right down the side of there as long as you maintain the open space behind it.
Well, there's some additional standards in there that, you know, if that side was on a public road, well, there's standards that the access would have to be limited and.
Sure. But
Yeah.
you're basically saying we can take a
Yes,
whole bunch of houses, put them on a more compressed lot.
Correct.
As long as we maintain some open space.
correct.
Okay.
And all of those lots wouldn't have to be 3/4 of an acre.
Well, whatever. But
Yeah,
but
what I'm
there's not
saying
a
is
2-acre minimum anymore.
Right, right. It's the 2 acres density.
And that is in what district? Rural residential or?
I think ag,
Conservation open space, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Ag?
I can look real quick, hold on.
It's 5 acres in the conservation open
But we're
space.
changing it to, yeah, it was 5 acres. But if you go with this density,
It's still a 5 acre density, but
But you don't have to spread the houses out.
yeah,
Correct.
they'd be closer to
Right.
5 acres.
it's the, it's the AG in conservation open space. And Mr. Bitler had a comment that in that section there was an RR, and I think that was incorrect. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mike Laster, LESD. I was just wondering how much the township is paying Mr. Helfrich for the building ordinance?
We don't know yet.
Then we don't have a total.
We don't have a total at the moment.
How much do you usually charge?
Typically, I give a cost not to exceed, you know, based on the number of meetings, and I honestly don't know how far we are into the program.
Secretary's not here.
Right.
Cheryl Bowden, what was your not to exceed number in this case?
I think it was 15,000, right? But we're not nearly to that point. You know.
Gerald Bodeman, section 50613, shopping carts. The first and second sentences are identical to the third and fourth sentences.
Just bear with me here a minute, I got everything out of order.
Pardon?
I said, bear with me here, I'll fix that, I've got everything out of order here.
So you take the last 2 lines out.
Yeah.
Gerald Bozeman, section 608.8, under councilman. Incomplete sentence, doesn't tell us anything. Gerald Bozeman, section 701.1, what is an HI district? Something identified in the document as an HI district.
Yeah, I caught that one, fixed that. If you have your copy marked up, I'd be happy to take a look at it and make whatever other editorial.
I will be getting a copy to Mr. Price.
Oh, good.
Bill Bittler again. You have home occupations must meet the requirements of section 7. That appears to me to be the same as a Walmart moving into the area.
Correct. In
If
terms
you want
of,
this individual who wants to open up an office in his home to meet the same requirements as a new Walmart.
right, in other words, he can't create odors and create light pollution and noise, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not going to be an issue for somebody that has a simple home occupation to comply. But the reason you have that in there is so that somebody doesn't do something that's going to become a nuisance to the neighbors.
Charles Williams, you speak of items that you come across, will they'll be in discussion, they'll be in discussion. Where will that discussion take place? Will it be in an open forum like this once again? Or will it just be amongst
I
the
think that all the
supervisors?
workshops have been advertised.
Yeah, no, we're gonna come up with a date now and advertise it? Yeah, you guys, as long as everybody can get together.
We can
Yeah.
do that, yeah. And as I
Yeah,
say,
but we gotta advertise to make sure you, all three of you can be there.
yeah, we don't really need you, I guess.
No. I can eat supper.
No, that's fine. But it's still gonna need to be advertised.
Oh, yes.
Right,
Matt,
right.
didn't we discuss that yet last night at the meeting?
I think we had talked about
Yeah.
future meetings.
Yeah, well, isn't that the workshop we were talking?
Well, I don't know if
The
we're talking
future
about
meetings?
that, I don't know if we're talking about that specifically. What I was talking about is future public hearings like we're having tonight. But I think we would have to probably sit down and go over a lot of these suggested comments tonight and accept what we're gonna accept and make changes that we're going to change.
All right, so that should be different than what the public meetings that we're having.
I think what we're probably doing a similar format as we have the work sessions. Those will be publicly advertised, we'll go over all these comments, look at the sections, and make whatever changes the supervisors would deem appropriate, and then probably schedule another public hearing like this. After those changes, what the supervisors accept, they accept, what they don't, and then a new draft is done.
And as I said before, that what I will do in the next one would have the double underline and the strike through so that it's easy to find the changes.
And we can put, and we'll have, some of the stuff put up again on the internet.
Sure.
Gerald Bozeman, section 704.1, A5. You reference the Soil Conservation Service, there is no such agency anymore.
Yeah, it's the NRCS.
That's correct.
What section was that again?
704.1A5.
Bill Bittler again. What's the relationship between Article 7's requirement requesting a building permit and paragraph 1202.3's requirement?
give me that first section again. Cindy?
It's Article 7, the requirement there in the first page of the article. And paragraph 1202.3 concerning what you do with the submitted request for a building permit. What's the relationship between those two?
We're on 701. Is it?
I think it's in the second paragraph, probably. So before you submit a permit.
Oh, yeah, with the exception of residential uses, the applicant for a zoning permit for any other principal or accessory use shall include such application. So in other words, when you make application for the zoning permit, that's referenced in that 120, whatever that.
Yeah, the 1202.3 has
Right.
requirements for the submission for a zoning permit.
Right, this, for non-residential uses, this affidavit has to be.
But you also have non-residential uses back in 1202.3.
Well, they need to do both. This is part of what needs to be submitted.
Why do you need an affidavit stating that?
Because what you want to do is make sure that the applicant understands that they have to comply with these standards going
Who's going to give
forward.
them that?
What's that?
Who's going to give them that?
Who's going to give them what?
Standards. The zoning officer are going to hand.
It's in the ordinance.
Not everybody's going to have a copy of the ordinance, so they probably won't.
Well, if they're proposing a new commercial development in the township, they better well get an ordinance.
Somebody wants to open an office in his home has to go through this. The standards have it. They must comply with Article 7.
Correct.
Kim Worthing, I have a question. How do the supervisors plan to address the issue of replacing the supervisor? How can a new candidate come on board to make an informed decision?
That's beyond the scope of this meeting today. We're here to talk about the zoning ordinance, talk about something totally different.
Nathan Shaw, regarding the zoning map, I noticed where I live, my property changed from agricultural and residential to rural residential. Why the change if we're trying to stay more agricultural?
Where do you live at?
Mountain Pink Road.
Can you come up here, Shores?
Yeah.
Shaw.
Right here. Like, here's my property, these two spots here. Like, the first part and the back part were rural, and then this was all agricultural.
Mhm. So in other words, that before it was, the property was split?
On the current map, yeah.
Here, you can just draw it in there. So this was what, this was rural in the back?
Yeah.
Well, it still is rural.
Right, but this was ag.
So it was rural in the back and rural in the front and ag in between?
Yes.
That's where we had that 500-foot setback.
Oh, that was a 500-foot strip?
Yes.
Basically, what we tried to do was follow property lines as much as possible.
But it changes the ability of usage of part of the property, correct?
Yes, correct. So are you suggesting you would rather be one or the other, or?
I'd rather be the way it is, or agricultural, I guess.
Two L's?
One L and one M.
Okay.
Yep.
Bill Miller again. Paragraph 807.2 2H, private stables, says that the township will approve the soil erosion and sedimentation plan and manure management plan. There's no requirement to approve those plans. They must be developed, and must be kept on site, and must be billed for inspection, do not get approved. Eight oh seven point two eight.
I got it, I saw that on your list, and I made a note of that here.
Gerald Bodeman, section 829.3, parking, references paragraph, or section 504.
Should be 506.
All right, because 504 does not address parking.
Right, I went through and checked all the references again, which is something I do at the end, which I obviously forgot to do before, so I appreciate you catching all of those.
Bill Bodeman. I had this in my other write-up, I believe, on paragraph 806.3C and 806.3B. Are you guys going to rewrite those? I don't think they say what you want them to say.
What was the sections again?
806.3B and 806.3C.
In terms of the keeping of animals?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you had that on your...
Yeah, I have, I think, both. Well, I have, I think I rewrote the first one for you, and the second one I questioned, because you're gonna have a lot of animals if you put all those on a 1 acre lot. I don't think that's the intent, but it's the way it reads.
Okay.
Gerald Bodeman, section 837, junkyards. The sentence begins, junkyards, junkyards. I think we only need to say it once.
Kim Morsley, section 814, campgrounds. There are no requirements for a campground. However, problems such as trespassing, noise, and other nuisances prevented.
Actually, there are, if you look at that, it has to comply with the typically campground standards are included in the subdivision and land development ordinance as are mobile home park standards. And the township is subject to the county subdivision and land development ordinance, and that's where the standards are included.
So, I'm sorry, this is Amanda Orslick. So is that in this ordinance somewhere that we could look up those standards, or where do we find those standards for a
The county
campground?
subdivision and land development ordinance, which I believe is online. Yeah, it's online. If you go to the Columbia County Planning Commission site,
Okay.
that's where their subdivision and land development ordinance would be.
Thank you.
Gerald Bodeman, section 842.9F. Have we changed Larry's title to zoning inspector? Or is that a second hat he wears, or a third hat he wears?
I mean, it's obviously a typo. Is that are you gonna be including all of these in that?
He's gonna get a copy of all of...
Okay, can I just catch all of those at that point, if they're gonna be in there?
Well, this is a public hearing. I think the public has the right to know how many errors there are in this document.
Okay, that's fine.
Go with that number again, Jerry, please.
.9F. Gerald Bodeman, 842. .2 B, check that, yeah, B2. Talking about power plants, we don't have any power plants in Main Township, I don't anticipate we will. But we have two numbers, we have 50 feet and 25 feet with a space between them. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, next.
A, the race course for any animal racetrack shall not be less than, etc. Gerald Bodeman, 850.4, check that, 850.5. You use the term motor, I think you really mean engine. They are definitely there, from an engineering standpoint, they are noticeably different. A motor uses external power sources, an engine generates power internally. Section 860.7. We talk about transportation impact statement, other places it's traffic impact statement.
Well, I think it's actually traffic impact study, I think.
Then you're inconsistent. Curiosity question on section 862, solar power generation commercial. Section E, we require $1 million insurance minimum, but we have no such specification for insurance minimums on any other entity within this document. I'd like to know why.
So are you suggesting that this should come out or should be included in the others?
I think it needs to be given some serious consideration. If it's going to, if we're going to, it's just like the noise measurement portion. If we're going to include it in one place, it needs to be consistent and be in other places as well. If we're going to require insurance, there has to be insurance specifications elsewhere, otherwise get rid of it. Section 862.5, decommissioning. Section A says 12 months, Section E says 180 days. By my math, that's not the same thing. Section 875.2A, we have the same problem with motor versus engine. If you're talking about big motors, that's fine, but that's not what this is referring to.
Jerry,
Yes.
back to 862.5, decommissioning time limit. The solar power facility owner and operator shall have 12 months. But over on G, the landowner, if they're not the same, if they're leasing that property, the landowner then has another 180 days to complete the decommissioning, is the way I understood that.
Well, I'll have to reconcile that.
Well, is that not, because if,
It seems to me 180 days isn't enough.
okay, so the landowner responsibility will have another year to decommission it?
I'll reread that.
Bill Miller again. You have, what we're talking about here, you have several similar type equipment that you have different decommissioning intervals for. For instance, private wind turbines, must be removed, if not operational for 1 year. Private solar collectors must be removed immediately upon going out of service. Commercial communication device, I think it's one Jerry's talking about, must be removed within 180 days after cessation of use. Commercial solar power must be commissioned 24 months since last power produced. Commercial wind energy must be removed 1 year from abandonment of use. But all two of them are the same. All of them are different.
Gerald Bozeman, 875.3D. Vehicles with current license and current registration. They're redundant terms. Section 1102, definitions, it references words and phrases used in this Article 7. We're actually talking about Section 11. Same comment relative to business on page 11-3.
Gary, can we go back to 875.3D?
875 point what?
3D, is that the one you were talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Only vehicles with current license and registration waiting to be repaired or serviced or waiting to be picked up by the vehicle may be stored in an exterior area.
Yes.
If a legitimate automated service station stores more than 4 vehicles per service stall in exterior areas, it shall comply with junkyard regulation, which is being a fenced-in area.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Current license and current registration are the same thing.
He's saying that it's redundant.
You need one or the other, but not both.
All right. Is there any more?
Section 1102, page 11-7. Under definitions, you have right-of-way. That's really not a definition, that's a rule. It's either out of place or it's not defined properly, one of the two.
Yeah, that's correct.
You need to be consistent with you're going to call referred to state of Pennsylvania or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's back and forth multiple times in this document.
Do they mean the same?
They're basically saying we are legally a Commonwealth. If you're going to call it state, it's a lowercase s. If you're going to call it other Commonwealth, it's a capital C. Again, we're back to consistency.
Bill Billings, is there a Maine Township comprehensive plan? And is there a Maine Township planning commission?
No,
They're
there's
both-
a county,
they're both
and there's
referenced.
a county plan.
Well, it says in one or two places, Township comprehensive plan.
Well, Maine Township has we have a final report, background study, Columbia County comprehensive plan.
You're going with the county comprehensive plan.
That's the only ones that do it. They
Yeah,
got a
I-
grant to do it, and we have a Maine Township who told us what Maine Township was. And what it mostly says how many people's gonna live in the township.
It's one paragraph long, Bill.
Yep. And then, Bill, if you read the legal status of the comprehensive plan.
I don't need that.
It says, is not legally enforceable document.
And you reference on the frontage page here, the planning commission, Maine Township Planning Commission.
No, is it county planning commission?
Pardon?
They said they have a county planning commission.
I know what he's talking about, it's in the procedure,
Yeah.
right? That should be changed to, well, it's kind of technical. Do you guys consider yourself the planning committee? Or, no, you haven't done that? Okay.
They used to have one.
Right, but not anymore. Right.
When did we used to have one?
When the first ordinance was produced, that was the planning commission that put that together.
That was pre all of us, then, right?
Free all of you guys, not
Yeah.
me.
Because I haven't heard of that.
It existed.
Is there anything further? Any other comments?
Gerald Bodeman, section 1105.4F and 1105.5D are identical. And they both have to be there, but I don't think so. It's the wrong wording at any rate, if they're both going to be kept. Especially 1105.5D is worded incorrectly. Under administration, a general question, nowhere in this document do I find where it gives Larry Frace, our current zoning officer, authority to enter any private property to investigate a complaint. That's been one of the concerns that Larry has voiced in some of the complaints that have been raised over the last year. He's not authorized to do some of these things. How do we go about giving him the authority to do his job?
I think what you're talking about, Mr. Bodeman, is a matter that you can't address in the zoning ordinance because what you're asking for, or you're addressing there is the Fourth Amendment right to search and seizure. I've discussed those issues specifically with Mr. Frace. In certain circumstances, he may have to get an administrative search warrant to enforce the ordinance if the landowner will not give consent to access the property. You cannot just access private property for the purpose of conducting an inspection, generally without getting a warrant or the landowner's permission if you intend to cite him or enforce him. There are exceptions to that, but generally that is the case. You just can't give carte blanche in the ordinance to come onto anyone's private property. I don't think you'd want Mr. Frace coming onto your private property unannounced with a warrant for investigative purposes. I sure wouldn't want him on my property if I didn't know he was coming.
I don't want him there, but he did.
I don't know anything about that, so.
And then, no, it's not a problem, but it does happen. But how does he go about doing his job and enforcing this zoning ordinance without some authority?
He has the authority that's granted to him under the ordinance. Typically, if he gets a complaint, he will probably reach out to the landowner, investigate the circumstances, and take it from there. He just doesn't have the right to enter private property, with certain exceptions.
So if he gets a complaint, the odds are he's going to have to get in, you have to get a blanket request for, well, I'm not sure what the right term is, Larry, but a search warrant, basically, to be able to enter this property. To say that,
Unless
to come onto my property to say that I'm doing something wrong.
Unless he can-
Because Bill complained about it.
Unless I can observe it from a public room.
Unless it's open to public view where he can observe from a public place, or he's got the landowner's consent, or the person in charge for the time, he's probably gonna have to get an administrative search warrant.
I would like to see that stated somewhere in this document then, under administration.
Does that have to be in the document?
No, it doesn't. That's what the laws of the Commonwealth are. That's how they've developed in these particular instances. Because if he goes in there and cites somebody, and it's found to be an illegal search, whatever he finds is gonna be thrown out.
Well, I'm not going to push it that far, Larry, don't worry about it.
I'm not going to comment on that.
What about procedures for revoking conditional use or special exception rulings that have been granted when the landowner or the person asking for the special exception or the conditional use does not fully comply with the restrictions that were put on that use?
I don't think you can revoke the use. I think you could cite them for violating the terms and conditions of the use.
And what is the consequence of that? Larry can go on my farm, he cites you or something, what's the consequence?
If you don't comply, then he's probably gonna take it to the magistrate, and you're gonna get whatever fines that the magistrate may impose on that particular occasion. Typically, it's up to $500 per day, if the ordinance allows that, per day violation.
If the ordinance allows, where in the ordinance does it do that?
I don't specifically know if it does in here, I'm sure it does.
For
I'm sure
what?
it does address it.
What's that?
For enforcement.
Yeah, it's this language right out of the code.
Probably mirrors what the municipalities.
Correct,
code says.
correct. That gives up to $500 per day. But that's at the magistrate's discretion, correct.
Yeah, are we all done?
I don't know if are there any further comments?
Can we adjourn it earlier then?
I guess if there are no further comments, we'll adjourn the meeting.
There's a motion to adjourn?